for us, we think about it as the 3.0 joy span. What's the point of living that long and being healthy, fit, and active and mobile if you're miserable, if you're not having fun, if you don't have friends, if your family doesn't talk to you? And we felt like that conversation has kind of not been in the conversation in our world. And we wanted to, bring it back to joy.
Hello, and welcome to Pursuing Health. I'm Dr. Julie Fouché, family physician and former CrossFit Games athlete. Here, I bring you information and inspiration to help bridge the gap between fitness and medicine and support your journey toward your healthiest self. Thank you so much for joining me. Now let's get started with this week's episode. Welcome back to Pursuing Health. I'm really excited to be here with Colleen and Jason Wachob today. We have not caught up in a while, so we have lots to talk about, including a new book that is out today. But a little background on them first. They are co-founders and co-CEOs of mindbodygreen, the leading independent media brand dedicated to well-being with 15 million monthly unique visitors, which is pretty incredible. Colleen graduated from Stanford with degrees in international relations and Spanish, spent 10 years working at Fortune 500 companies, including Gap, Walmart, and Amazon, before devoting her life's work to mindbodygreen. And Jason, who I've had on the podcast long ago in episode 43, has his degree in history from Columbia, where he played varsity basketball for 4 years. He's also the host of the Mindbodygreen podcast and bestselling author of Wellth, How I Learned to Build a Life, Not a Resume. They live now in Miami, Florida, with their 2 girls, Ellie and Grace, and as of today, are co-authors of The Joy of Wellbeing, a practical guide to a happy, healthy, and long life, soon to be another bestseller. So thank you guys so much for joining me.
Oh, thank you so much. It's so great to see you. We miss you. We hope you come to Miami.
I know. I'm excited to catch up, and next time in Miami to see you guys in person. I was thinking back as we were getting ready for this podcast, and it's been a long time since we've seen each other. A lot has happened. We first connected for the 2016 Mindbodygreen Revitalize conference. And then I came again the next year in 2017 and obviously had Jason on the podcast. But so much has happened in all of our lives in the last 6 years. So much has happened in the world. So much has changed in the world of wellness and in the world in general. And so I was telling you before we pressed record that I saw the topic of this book and I was so excited because I feel like this is so much of my own personal journey and path over the last few years, and also what I talk to patients about every single day. So I'm excited to dig in, but thought maybe we could start first with your own experience and what led you down this path of wellness. Because you each have very, for many people, it's usually a personal experience that brings them to the world of wellness, alternative medicine, off the conventional path. And I think that's true for both of you as well.
So, I think my why has changed with the birth of our 2 young children and just me getting older. I'm 48 now, and men in my family have a terrible track record in longevity. My father died of heart disease at 47, and my two grandfathers, one died of heart disease at 49 and the other of cancer at 44. And so I want to stick around for a while.
Yeah.
I do believe in epigenetics. I do believe we have the power to turn on and off genes through lifestyle modification. So I believe that family history stops with me. And I also know that I'm not unique there. I know that everyone's got a family history, whether it's cardiovascular disease or cognitive decline or cancer or diabetes, what have you. So I'm not alone. And for me, it's personal. And with our kids, it really hits home. And so, I think where we sit today, over the past 14 years of mindbodygreen, the conversation of longevity has advanced so much. And we view the 1.0 of longevity, let's just live for as long as possible lifespan. So let's live to 100 years old. And then health span was the 2.0 where, if you want to be healthy and fit and mobile for 99 years, 11 months, 30 days, and then rapidly decline over 24 hours or die of a heart attack.
Doing something really exciting, like jumping out of an airplane yeah.
Exactly. And then for us, we think about it as the 3.0 joy span. What's the point of living that long and being healthy, fit, and active and mobile if you're miserable, if you're not having fun, if you don't have friends, if your family doesn't talk to you? And we felt like that conversation has kind of not been in the conversation in our world. And we wanted to, bring it back to joy and intention. Why are we here? What are the things we want to be doing? And just, in all this advancement, this is what we do in our business, in our life. And even Colleen and I started to feel we can't do all of this. We don't have the time and resources. And if we can't do it, this is our business. How can the normal person? And it became a passion point where we said, you know what? We actually think the science, where it is today, we can get you to 80% of your maximum well-being with limited time, with limited resources, and you can have fun.
Imagine that.
I know.
Yeah. My journey originally on health and well-being, when I think of over a decade ago, started with one of those personal events that was one of those breakdown moments where you kind of had to seek through your own answers and carve a new life path. So over 10 years ago now, I had a pulmonary embolism. So blood clots had formed in my lungs and really happened out of the blue for me. One of those complete out of nowhere events for me. I was leaving a Strala yoga class from our mutual friend, Tara Stiles. And it was my Saturday morning ritual. And I was walking around the West Village. This was back when we lived in New York City. And I was having some trouble breathing. So I called Jason to have him come into the city and meet me. We walked around. I was still having some trouble breathing. So we went home on the subway, and it was a station that had very steep steps. And I collapsed as I was trying to walk out of the subway station steps. And then after I got out of the subway station, we called my doctor, and I did what so many people unfortunately sometimes do, which is I totally gaslit myself and was like, I'm totally fine. I'm just dehydrated.
Right. I'll walk it off.
Totally. And I was super lethargic, out of body, the rest of the weekend, took naps, things I didn't really do. Come Monday morning, Jason was like, if you go into work, the only way I will let you do that is if you stop at the doctor on the way. So I stopped at my GP, who was in Soho, and, within a couple of minutes, he's like, you're having a pulmonary embolism. I was like, what is that? What does that mean? So he made me a little note. I'm having a pulmonary embolism. Wasn't quite sure if he didn't think I'd make it to the NYU ER, if he thought I'd be so injured once I was there that I wouldn't be able to communicate what was happening. But I had showers of clots in my lungs, and, was really lucky to make it through that journey. But it was the start of a very long healing process, a very long, one of those moments where you reassess your life journey and your life path and all the decisions that you're making. And, my wish for people is they don't have to have this breakdown moment to listen to the whispers in your body and your mind that something's out of whack. Because I do think that the body was giving me a lot of clues and whispers that I just kind of shunned away and didn't really listen to. And then I had no choice but to. And that was the start of looking at Western, looking at more holistic paths. That was very much new to me. But, living in New York, there was a lot of places to explore. And I tried everything to try to feel better, to try to get more in tune with what a well-lived life would mean for me. And the joy of well-being is a roadmap I wish I had 10 years ago when I was starting this journey. I think it would have been a lot more efficient of a journey and would have had a lot better ROI and perhaps a more linear path if I had a little bit more guidance on the foundations and the principles of well-being.
Wow. Well, you guys have done so much of the legwork for others, just looking at mindbodygreen itself and all of the experts that you bring together. And I've loved how you always, it's a place where you are filtering through a lot of information that's out there, but are open to all opinions. I mean, I remember at the conferences I was at, you would have, vegans and, someone who was passionate about keto there, having a friendly debate, and we're having these real conversations that need to be had. And how you also really don't throw all of Western medicine out either. I think in a lot of alternative circles, it's easy to do that and to look at, some of the downfalls of Western medicine, but like anything, there's good and bad, and all of these tools have their place. It's unfortunate that I think a lot of Western medicine has just lost some of the humanity part of it. And so it's hard to figure out when you need those tools and how to use them sometimes. But you both have done, with your personal stories and experience and with mindbodygreen, such a great job, I think, of using all the tools and seeing the truth, kind of the thread of truth through all of them, which I think is really important.
Yeah. And what I forgot to mention about my pulmonary embolism is when it happens to a 32-year-old woman, they do a battery of tests, and the likely culprit was the birth control pills that I was on for over 10 years. And when I wrote a story about it on mindbodygreen, it went pretty viral. And I heard from hundreds of people whose mother, sister, cousins had similar experiences, sometimes ending tragically. But I'm not against, Western medicine or, pharmaceuticals in any way. I just think for me, the larger life lesson was more about listening to your body, knowing that you have to be the CEO of it, and understanding everything that you're consuming and ingesting, and what are the side effects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think I also loved your sharing your story of having your children, because you went through a long journey there as well. And again, through Eastern and Western medicine, which I know is a struggle that so many people have, but I thought that was another just beautiful example of how, we need the balance of both in order to be able to, to figure things out.
Yeah, that was one that was very hard on the both of us. And I played a significant role in this. And I shared my story is the fact that men account for 40% of fertility issues. So it's guys, it's us too. And, we had difficulty getting pregnant, and sure enough, it was me. And I wasn't producing sperm. And so it wasn't genetic. So they believed it was there was a blockage as spermia. So something was blocking the sperm from coming out. And I did a whole battery of tests where they tried to identify. There was one area that was extraordinarily common where the majority of cases experienced a blockage, and it wasn't there for me. And so things were looking bleak. And the only other way to know if I was producing sperm was to undergo a procedure where a specialist came in. This is what he did. He comes in once a month to a fertility clinic in New York and would cut open your testicles and then try to extract the sperm. And
sounds like a lot of fun.
It was, and it was this was it. If we were going to have a biological child. And I'll never forget, it was a Saturday morning. This place was a factory, and we're lined up, and we sit with the doctor. And for someone who believes in having having a connection with your doctor, this couldn't be further from it. We sat down immediately. He's drinking his soda at 8 a.m. And he says, I hope this works, because adopting just really isn't a viable option, because the kids have all these problems. And we're just like, we don't believe any of this. I'm like, oh, great. This is the guy who's about to cut open my testicles. Right. No, I can't, I don't like what he's drinking. I don't like what's coming out of his mouth. And he's about to cut me open in a place where I'm very vulnerable.
That's terrifying.
Yeah. But he was the guy. He was the guy who did this all day, and he was a specialist. And so we went forward with it. And luckily enough, 12 vials of sperm were there, it came out. And, to this day, we still don't know where the blockage was. And I kind of let it go. I went back to the doctor after. So I was like, okay, maybe something changed. And he's like, why do you care? It was like, maybe it was my homocysteine that was sky high or something else going on. So I think everyone's
just want to know. Yeah.
So no, they're like, we don't know. And who cares? You have two beautiful, healthy children. But it wasn't, it was in many ways just the starting line.
Yeah. That was just to get to the starting line. And we thought once we got there that it would be, smooth sailing. But, after that point, it was probably, three more years. 9 IVF transfers and a couple of miscarriages, 15 embryos transferred to get to our first daughter. Wow. And, the hardest part wasn't the physical part. It was the uncertainty of not knowing and surrendering, which were, words that don't come naturally to me. And, trying not to put meaning on something that was really horrible. And that was really excruciating to go through individually and as a couple, and, really brought forward for us, the importance of believing in something bigger, because there are these ups and downs in life that you really can't pinpoint a reason to.
And I think in our world too, there are often expectations with around pregnancy where, oh, you're stressed, or, have you tried this or that treatment? And I remember we explored everything. For me, I remember going to some alternative healers, and I was prescribed castor oil, and it's like, oh, this is going to fix it. I'm like, I never
fix it, yeah.
castor oil again. It's like, and there are expectations around, well, you could have a natural birth, and this idea that a lot of people in our space, which you see portrayed on social media, and that just wasn't in the cards for us at all.
Yeah.
There was nothing wrong with us, and that's just the way sometimes things go. And I think it's a deeper problem in our world where, it's very easy to get an idea or in our heads or become fixated on what perfection is, and this is amplified on social media. And if you don't meet that criteria, you're flawed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Wow. Well, what a great segue. I think this is where, first of all, thank you for sharing your stories so openly, because I know these are all such deeply personal experiences, but they, as you see on Mind Body Green, sharing them, I think touches other people who are going through so many similar things. And this concept, like Colleen mentioned, of surrender and letting go and believing in maybe something bigger, or letting go of perfection, letting go of attachment to certain outcomes, I think is so much of my own journey. But what I see with a lot of patients, where a lot of what's portrayed on social media or in the world of fitness and wellness about the ways that things should be done or could be done, you can have the perfect sleep routine, the perfect nutrition and every macro and micronutrient. And, you can exercise and do the perfect amount of weightlifting and, CrossFit training every area of fitness, and do your meditation and all of these things. And I think for me, also going through medical school and then learning about functional medicine, it felt like, wow, this is it. This is the root cause. If we can really get, nutrition and exercise and sleep and stress management all dialed in, that's it. But then realizing that there's a whole deeper layer there about the intention behind it and about the sort of emotional, spiritual health, I think, that underlies all of that. Because if you're just trying to perfect every area, often that's going to lead to more disease, more symptoms, oftentimes.
Yeah, I mean, you're really getting at kind of our intentional use of the word well-being versus wellness, because wellness to us does seem about optimization, hacking. And really, we wanted to shift the conversation to well-being, where you do have to take care of yourself, and then you can think through your family and your community, but it's more about the experiences along the ride than the perfection and optimization for an outcome.
And I think you're absolutely right. And that nutrition and exercise are foundational. You have to do it. And I think people listening probably have a good idea. Am I eating well, or am I exercising enough? You kind of know that. But when it comes to one's emotional health, those are often more difficult questions, more difficult conversations that can sometimes be very troubling and require a lot of deep personal work. Do you have someone to call in the middle of the night when something hits the fan? If you don't, that's you need to ask yourself some questions. And it really speaks to the health benefits of connection and the loneliness epidemic we are facing. And this one really hit home for me. Connection is something, after playing basketball in college, I had so many great friends in New York, and we all kept in touch. And then, started to get a little bit older and started to work a bit more. And then I get married, then kids, and I lost touch with a lot of them. And men traditionally are terrible here. Women are much better than men. And that's a fact. And I'm one who can get caught up in, I'm wearing my Aura, my Whoop. I do 20 vials of blood twice a year with Frank Littman. If something's off, I'm like, what, we need to get to the bottom of this,
right?
Stool test, and this one is one I've had to work on. And there's one of my all-time favorite studies, I think speaks volume. It's the Roseto study. And Roseto was this small town in rural Pennsylvania in the 1950s. And this is around the time that heart disease arrives in America, except in Roseto. And so they took a closer look. What are these people doing in Roseto? That's amazing that they're immune from heart disease, because those under 65 Heart attacks were half of the nation, half that of the rest of the nation. Then men under 55, zero, non-existent. These people must be in incredible shape, eating well. No, they were smoking, they were drinking, they were eating lots of pasta and meatballs. This makes no sense. So they take a closer look, and they had incredibly strong social connections. They were socializing daily. They were celebrating with parades, parties. The drinking was with family and friends. They have such strong social connections. And then in the 1960s, people start to move away. The community falls apart. Guess what? Heart disease catches up with the national average. And to me, given the loneliness epidemic, the mental health epidemic, there was this 2019 study out of Cigna that said that only half of Americans had meaningful IRL face-to-face interactions. This is 2019. Imagine what that number is
after 2020, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a scary thing to think about. And I think we all felt that in the pandemic, right? There was a huge microscope on that and how much people were craving that real life connection when things open back up again. But yeah, how are for you? Because I know this is something that's hard. Like you said, it's not straightforward. It's not like it's almost the definition is you can't follow a step-by-step algorithm here. But how have each of you started to overcome some of that perfectionism or that striving for control and being able to sort of let go and be at a place where you're writing a practical guide about getting the 80% instead of being perfect?
I mean, there's been a lot of influences on this journey. And I think the past, since 2020, the past 3 years have obviously impacted our perspective on this immensely. And we've had to be intentional about social connection within our own lives and weaving it in with intentionality. Jason shared, it's how it adversely impacts men. But I feel as a woman, I also have to be intentional about creating those IRL situations and calendaring it in with the same type of intensity that I would, nutrition or movement or, the other foundational principles of health and well-being. What, I found that motivates me now, Jason mentioned that our why has evolved over the past decades, and we have 2 little girls, and it's hard to be a human right now, but it's really hard to be a young girl, and boys certainly have their own, obstacles and struggles right now. But the motivation for us, or for me, I should say, has been heavily influenced by Lisa Miller, Dr. Lisa Miller, who actually lives here in Coconut Grove.
Oh, I just love her. I just had her on the podcast, and she blew my mind.
As she has done to ours.
Gotta come to my place.
Everyone's here. Yeah.
Yes.
So she found that when the mother and child were both high in spirituality, the child was 80% protected against depression compared with mothers and children who were not concordant for spirituality. And so when mothers and children were high in spirituality, a child was 5 times less likely to be depressed when spiritual life was shared with a mother. So this whole mental health epidemic that is impacting everyone is something that's very top of mind for us as we think of how we want to live an intentional life and what we want it to look like. And I'm not someone who's followed organized religion in my life. Jason has. But what I love about Dr. Miller's research is she has such a generous and open definition of spirituality, and that there's so many ways to tap into this deeper meaning and connection into your life. It could be prayer, it could be religion, it could be a walk in the woods, it could be a transcendent experience, it could be volunteering, picking up trash, whatever helps you feel clarity and connection beyond your own individual experience is what brings you closer to these universal truths and experiences. And she's had just, I think, such a profound influence on not just the book, The Joy of Wellbeing, but also just, how we live our lives and how when we think of our own personal mission statements, it really goes back to our daughters and, the values that we want to strive to embody in our everyday lives so that they see and can mirror that as they grow older.
Oh, I just love that. Yes. I just had her on recently, and her story blows me away. I love the way that she talks about spirituality, and it's so often spirituality is sort of tainted by an individual's experiences with organized religion. And, she does such a good job of finding the universal truths through all of it. This loved, held, guided, never alone principle, which I think any of us can think of at least one moment in our lives where we felt something like that. So
Yes.
I just love that. I just love that. What are, through your journey, through all the people you've worked with individually, together as a couple, through Mind Body Green, who are some of the healers, and you don't have to give names, it may be just like types of healers that have had the biggest impact on you?
Lisa's the big one.
Mm.
I think to really quantify the impact of spirituality and the role it plays in terms of the mental health benefits, it's just huge.
Mm-hmm.
And more specifically, because of what we're going through in 2023 with the mental health epidemic, I think anyone who's got a child or everyone's touched by mental health. And when we have such an issue culturally, and when you're talking about 5 times less likely to experience depression, this is something that should be front page news.
Right.
Why aren't we?
There's no drug that does that.
Yes. And so this is, you don't have to sweat. You don't have to, God forbid, you don't have to go to you don't have to do all the out, and all those things are fantastic and have real benefits too in terms of mental health. But this is a big one. And when you're talking about, walking in nature, having, volunteering, picking up trash on the road. This is we're talking pretty broad here.
Yeah, totally.
The implications are huge. So she's had, and whenever you can marry science with spirituality, real hard science, that's really powerful. So she's one that immediately comes to mind.
Yes.
But I would say everyone, I think we've been so blessed over the course of 14 years. We've interviewed hundreds of people, thousands of experts have written for us. And I think at our core, Colleen and I are good at filtering and curating.
Yes.
Identifying those who are credible and those who aren't, and taking the best of the best, and also distilling it down to the most practical, because very few people have the time to do everything.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big objection. It's always, I don't have the time and I don't have the resources. Well, we have a solution.
Right. Or you get caught in the details without getting the most important things, right? If you're trying to do it all, you could end up spending your time on these little 1% things without addressing the things that are the 80%,
Yes. Our friend JJ Virgin we borrowed this from her, where she says, you gotta focus on baking the cake before you put on the frosting. And it feels like we're all caught up in the frosting, and we just love cakes, So that feels, and look, I like the frosting. we have all the gadgets as I sleep.
Totally. Yeah.
They're sleep
fun.
Mattress, Aura Ring, and Whoop, and the blood, and the Genova, and you name it. I've tried it. That's all the great icing, but the foundation of the cake is what's really going to get you there. We don't spend enough time on that.
Right. And you guys, so that's where I guess we dig into this book. I think I'm holding it up for people who are watching. I'm really excited that it's out today, but where you have such a unique perspective. So there's so many books out there that people have written about wellness, but so often they're on one, narrow focus, their experience, their expertise. Again, these things that can be conflicting, like keto or paleo or vegan, but you have the perspective of, for over a decade, filtering through so many of these experts and being quite good at it. I will attest to that really finding the thread of truth and the things that really move the needle. And so that's why I think this book is so valuable, because you have that bird's eye view, you have that perspective that not everybody does. And you've really distilled it down to, I think, 8 different areas that are that 80%. If we can do the basics in those 8 areas, that should get us a lot of the way to well-being, to health, to longevity, wellness. So we've talked about a few of them already, but could you share a little bit more about some of those 8 areas?
Yeah. Should we kick it off with breath?
I think we have to.
When we talk about, using your energy and resources in the most efficient way to get the best outcome, breath is the most natural place to start, because you are breathing between 17,000 and 30,000 times a day. And then you add to that, more than half the population is breathing all wrong through their mouth. So if you're looking for a place to start, that will impact all areas of your health. nostril breathing is the best place to start from an ROI standpoint. It filters out the bad stuff like bacteria and viruses, increases your CO2 tolerance. There's just so many wonderful reasons to do it. I really got drawn to breath after my pulmonary embolism because it was the first time that I actually struggled to breathe. And I remember being on New York subways in the summer and, kind of fighting senior citizens for a seat because I was worried about not being able to make it through on a sweaty subway ride home without being out of breath. And as someone who has been prone to anxiety in life, when you think of nostril breathing also as a way to activate the rest and digest system, so instead of your fight or flight system, so that you're automatically, entering life with a little bit more calm once you're nostril breathing, it's had such a profound impact on my life. And when you look at the kind of metrics of our book, of it has to be accessible, it has to be easy, you have to be
free
in your life, free. Like, here's some place we can all start.
Absolutely. I love that one. And it's something to me, it's the easiest place to start. I talk about it with almost every patient. It seems just some simple breathwork techniques that you can do anytime, anywhere, that are going to change your nervous system. It's one of the easiest ways to change your state. So I love the focus on that.
Yeah. And like, if you're not, you can't go without breathing for a couple minutes.
Right.
So it seems like you're doing it anyway, you might as well do it right. And it really is simple nasal breathing. And in the book, we go into all the different methods if you want to take it up a notch, like some people do. But it was the most logical. Mm-hmm. And there's a downstream effect with the other big one, which is sleep.
Mm-hmm.
You don't breathe for a couple minutes, you're probably not going to be here. If you don't sleep for a week, you're probably not going to be here either.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many like personal anecdotes, obviously in this book, but in my early 20s, I let a work presentation in front of senior executives that would determine a final job placement just spiral out of control in my mind. And I have a tendency to have an overactive racing mind. And after 3 nights of not sleeping, I ended up, going to the hospital where they gave me a Xanax. And then I slept, but that mm-hmm. was kind of where my sleep etiquette started and stopped. Mm-hmm. So sleep is something that, is deeply personal to me. 33% of us have some sort of sleep disorder, the most common of which is insomnia. And, from a health standpoint, you never want to get less than 5 hours of sleep. And if you get 3 days of no sleep like me, you might end up in a hospital. So yeah. I'm thrilled that there's such a wonderful conversation around sleep fitness, and that, this conversation has become fully mainstream and fully embraced in such a wonderful way. And, we are thoughtful about our sleep etiquette. I've made adjustments in terms of getting sunlight earlier in the day. I'm very thoughtful about my caffeine curfew. If people say, stop around 12, I'm probably stopping around like 10:30 because I'm so sensitive. Mm-hmm. We're aware of, sleep anxiety, and that even having an alarm clock in your room can actually exacerbate those feelings of sleep anxiety. So if you are someone who's prone to sleep anxiety, you should probably throw out, the clock. If I don't drink a lot, because I did see the impact on my HRV and my sleep mm-hmm. From my Oura Ring. But if I do, I have a margarita at lunch instead of at dinner so that I can get
drink earlier.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But practical, right? That's a practical tip.
It's like, look, I think our advice with alcohol is, if you don't drink, don't start. But if you do enjoy a drink with friends, you should have that drink. And our advice is have it earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Enjoy it. Have a good one. If it's a bad drink, don't drink it. Have a great wine, a great margarita.
Yeah. And there's these wonderful contradictions that, you were talking earlier about people seeing things and thinking, okay, I see this person, I see this expert doing it. The hardest thing to do is to actually take this information, critically think about what you and your body actually need, not just to survive, but actually to thrive, and apply it to your life in a way that brings you joy. So every sleep expert will tell you, do not watch TV in bed. And, Jason and I intentionally watch great programs in bed and break all the sleep rules because it brings a lot of joy to
us. Rebels.
I know. It enables us to leave the wellness world and leave the well-being world and, travel to all these wonderful television shows that bring us some joy.
We are mindful about the types of content we watch. We tend to stay away from the news, more light programming, watching Drive to Survive, the Netflix show on Formula One. Puts me to sleep.
Totally. That's so true, though. Sometimes you just have to do something that's just for fun. If it's all so structured, do things that bring you joy, right?
Yes.
So nutrition is another area that I know you all have. This is a hot topic, right? It is a religion, politics level debate and always has been. But you, again, have done a great job of cutting through the noise, finding what are the common themes, what are the themes that, are most important for people. So what do you recommend as a starting place, and how's that evolved for you?
You're absolutely right. This one is full of landmines. It is tricky. It is deeply, deeply personal. And we do believe in bioindividuality. There are some people who can look at steak and their lipid panel goes through the roof. And other people who could consume, 3 steaks a day and be totally fine. And so we do encourage people to, do some basic blood work to understand where they fit.
Mm-hmm.
With all that said, we do believe in eating in real whole foods. We believe that you should try to avoid, again, processed foods happen, but try to avoid ultra processed foods when you can. There's one study from France that's gotten a lot of attention that showed that a 10% increase in consumption of highly ultra processed foods resulted in a 14% increased risk of death. And that's bad news for us in the States.
Mm-hmm.
That's like 2/3 of all calories consumed by kids.
Oh, geez.
So we've got a processed foods problem. And I think that's one where everyone can kind of agree on. I think we're fiber deficient. We need to consume fiber. But we believe in eating the rainbow. We believe in eating high quality animal protein, specifically if you're interested in maintaining or building lean muscle mass. That is just very important. It's something that I've prioritized as I've aged. I've started to lose some muscle because I wasn't lifting, and now I'm back in our great gym Anatomy, which I know you've been to.
Yes.
And so that's a big one. And I think it is highly personal. And we like to reference 2 of our friends. So to prove this point, one of them is Mark Sisson, who's 69 and lives in Miami. And go look up Mark on Instagram. He looks phenomenal and feels phenomenal. Mm-hmm. And he's pretty close to eating a carnivore diet. And then our other friend, Rich Roll, is 56, and he looks phenomenal and feels phenomenal, but he's 100% plant-based. Mm-hmm. These 2 men really have nothing in common in terms of their diet other than they avoid processed food, and they both really work out a lot, probably way too much. But and so we just really encourage people to really eat whole foods and find what works for them. And we have some ideas on how to approach that in the book.
Love that. How about movement? I know each of your movement practices have also evolved over the years. I know last time we talked, Jason, you shared a lot about your story with your back and how much yoga had helped you, but can you talk a little bit about movement and what you're recommending there?
I mean, you talked a little bit about the tribalism in nutrition, and there's a tribalism within movement now too. And we shared a stat on the mindbodygreen Instagram that definitely shifted my perspective on movement. But the comments definitely kind of blew us away on this one, because if it's the first time you're hearing this stat, it is very staggering. Which is, if you're over 65, there's a 25% chance that you'll fall, and if you do fall, studies show that your chances of falling again double. And if you fall and break your hip, then there is a 30 to 40% chance that you will die within a year, not from the fall, but from all the things related to the fall, from hospital infection, whatever it may be, depression. And that stat shifted my whole perspective on movement. And I think in the 2010s, being in New York, which was a mecca of the wellness and well-being world, there was such a movement around Pilates and yoga, which are wonderful parts of a movement routine. But that focus on building up my armor for the type of body that I want to have in 30 to 40 years, so that I can be there to break the fall, so that I can carry if my children have children, grandchildren, proudly, and building up that armor. So that stat has fully changed kind of how I think about training. And now I'm much more mindful about incorporating kettlebells, weights, and resistance training into movement.
And sarcopenia is a lot more common than you think. You lose 1% of bone density a year after age 40. And if you make it to age 80, half of people living in their 80s are living with sarcopenia. this hit home for me. You mentioned, we spoke a while ago, it was yoga, yoga, yoga. And I did a little resistance training, but not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the process of writing this book, I got on the scale and I noticed I'd lost some weight, and it didn't make sense. Everything kind of fit the same. And then I looked in the mirror and then I noticed, oh my God, I lost my, once basketball butt from college. It's gone. And then I said, well, actually, this kind of makes complete sense because I never really liked doing legs. So I stopped doing any resistance training on legs like 25 years ago. So, duh.
Yeah.
And, hearing that stat, it was a wake up call. So I'm back in the gym and also doing, some body weight exercises to get my legs and my butt back. But it was a wake up call. I'm 48, not the spring chicken that I used to be.
Totally. Well, good thing you had that wake up call now and not 10, 20 years from now. Yeah.
We live in Miami, so
those things matter.
But aesthetics aside, it was a wake up call. It could happen to anyone. It started to happen to me, and it's more difficult as you age. And so I'm back in the gym, and again, it's about longevity. It's like, what do I want to be doing 40 years before? Kids are little, so I want to be able to pick up a 30-pounder and be able to squat with that child and move around, and you need leg strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that I'm sure all the CrossFitters listening are happy to hear about that with, our emphasis on functional movement. And I think what a great example with that stat on, okay, if we're hyper focused on, every, sleep metric and making sure we have the latest technology and all these things, but we have failed to get enough protein and weight bearing exercise, and then we fall at age 65 and break a hip, then think about how much energy we've spent on things that maybe weren't the highest yield. And so that being one that, that stat is pretty mind blowing just to think about how big of an impact it can make.
It is. And unfortunately, anecdotally, we know a number of people that have been affected by this, where a family member is older and falls, and it's really led to a rapid decline. It's real.
It's hard to recover from if you don't have the resilience. Yeah, for sure. So speaking of resilience, next talk about stress resilience. And so there's so many aspects to this, but what are some kind of practical tips for this area?
So this was an interesting one, for us, and we got why are you including this from our publisher? So, we talk a lot about cold therapy. It's a great hormetic stressor. There's tremendous science there. It's very popular. It's all the rage with cold plunges, people doing cold showers and cold baths, but we don't do it. We don't do it because it doesn't bring us joy.
Yeah, there you go.
I do think, and look, we encourage everyone to try it. And look, for a lot of people, they're not going to like it, but they're like, you know what? I can kind of work it into my routine, and it's in the book because it's accessible. We're talking like a couple minutes. If you can do this in a cold shower or a cold bath, or you can afford a cold plunge, no brainer, because the return on investment in terms of your time is really powerful. The benefits are real in terms of longevity, but it doesn't bring us joy. And so we don't do it. And I think people sometimes in our space won't talk about things that they don't do. And we're like, we're open. We don't do it. We're not going to pretend to do it. If you go for it, the benefits are amazing, but you know what? It doesn't bring us joy. And there is an expectation in our space where you have to do everything and you have to be perfect, but you know what? You don't. If you don't like cold plunges, don't do it. If you're a little bit uncomfortable, I do think you need to be comfortable with being uncomfortable to some extent. But the reality is we have a problem with adding things into our lifestyle that really don't fit in our lifestyle. And that's why January 13th is Quitter's Day at the gym, because they sign up for, they make promises that they can't keep.
Right. I love that. And it gives you more credibility that you would include it and talk about it and just say, we don't do it because it doesn't bring us joy. So that's cool. So the last three, I think we could cover together. They're, talking about connection, which is something mindbodygreen has always been about, this connection with the world, with nature, with the fact that we are all connected, which again goes back to Lisa Miller. But, that part being connected to the earth, also being connected with people, as we've touched on already, and the Rosetta story, and then purpose. Finding and seeking your purpose and aligning your life and your actions with that. So How do you describe these three? Sort of, where do they fall in the grand scheme of the book?
So I think in terms of, there's this greater idea of connection in general. After all, we're mind, body, green, one word, not three. And we do have this belief we're not a closed system. We're open to the world, what we bring inside, what we eat, what we drink, what we breathe. And when you understand that on an intellectual, emotional, and spiritual level, you kind of understand that things need to change. I think in the environmental conversation, we could have gone like numerous ways, and it could be quickly become an episode of Portlandia, where you're just not doing enough. And I think for us, we tried to focus on a couple areas. One is food waste, which is huge. And that is as simple as making sure you eat the food you buy and maybe don't overorder. Or, we love vegetables here. And so we buy frozen vegetables. One, they're inexpensive, and two, they're cheaper. And if you're busy meal planning, this is real. There's a shelf life. If you buy something fresh versus frozen, much longer. That's a big one. And then something else in the research of the book, what was surprising to us, was fast fashion. And so fast fashion, we had originally thought was for people who were lower income. Those aren't the people buying fast fashion. They're people with plenty of disposable income. They were just like buying tons of clothes. And the waste there is considerable. And so our view there is just buy items of clothing you really like and that last, without, so like focusing on areas which I think feel manageable. And so that's how we kind of thought about the environmental piece. In terms of, what was the other? Sorry, I lost my train.
Connection and purpose. I know we talked about connection a little bit, and then purpose was the last one.
I mean, the connection and purpose chapters are really our favorite chapters of the book, because we think they're also the most under-talked within the health and wellness world. We hear so much about, health and fitness influencers. Who knows what a connection influencer looks like or acts like? And when you look at, some of the science, exercise can lower your mortality risk by 20%. Having a good diet is more or less the same at 30%. But being in a good romantic relationship, having friends, being connected to your community can lower your mortality risk by 45%. So connection is probably the most important drug that we're not talking enough about. And they're muscles that we have to build in terms of being comfortable reaching out to friends, making new friends, and prioritizing community, which is something that, living in a new city for the first time in 13 years, they're muscles that, we've had to build, that we've had to put ourselves in situations that maybe would have felt awkward or out of place a couple of years ago, because that is such a foundational pillar for ourselves and our family. And then
go ahead.
Yeah. And I think, just a practical tip, something that I've employed, like I've lost touch with a lot of people. And the question is, well, how do you do that? It used to be a long time ago, God forbid, you'd have to pick up your phone and call someone and say, hey, who is this? Who's calling me? Now, a wonderful aspect of technology is texting, where, we talked to the relationship expert, Esther Perel, about this. And her advice was really sound and simple. It's a simple text. Hey, so-and-so, it's been too long. Thought about you for X, Y, and Z. How are you? Would love to reconnect. Simple as that. And you will be surprised about how quickly that response will usually come. And you will gauge also very quickly, is this person interested in reconnecting or not? And it's so easy to do via text. And that's something I'm working on. And bringing it back to purpose, I think this is a loaded word for a lot of people, and can often, mean on Instagram, quitting your job and going to Bali and doing the whole eat, pray, love thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, for us, it's a little bit more simpler, asking the questions, why do you get out of bed in the morning? Do you feel like you have a higher calling? Do you feel useful and relevant? Are you caring for other people? Are you looking forward, or are you looking backward? And there was a great tip we got from Arthur Brooks, the phenomenal expert on this subject, where he said, you should write a mission statement. Try to articulate what purpose means. And this speaks to intention. We don't want to just live a long time, What is our purpose? What do we want to be doing? Be a little bit more thoughtful about your why.
Well, I know that's had something that has had a huge impact on me and many of those, harder times in life that's come out of that and has evolved over the years and can make such a big difference, being able to connect to that why, whatever it is, and as it evolves over time. And with the connection too, I think that's something that I also have really had to put a lot of effort in. I think sometimes we go through early life and connections are so natural because it happens where we go to school or the sports teams, like you said, Jason, or where we work. And now all of a sudden we're working remote and we're just not seeing people as regularly. And so for me, I think mine came a lot because I was so hyper-focused on, my own, school and residency and CrossFit. And so really let a lot of those connections fall to the wayside. And it takes effort to reconnect. And again, to figure out who are the people that you really, like you say, you really want to be surrounded with, and that bring you positive energy and that you feel like are on the same path. And so that's been really impactful for me. So it's cool to hear you guys talking about that as well. Now, this is a practical guide, and I love how you talk about, yourself, making yourself the CEO of your own well-being. So how do you recommend, let's say somebody's just starting down this path, or they're maybe doing a couple of these things, but how do you recommend people pursue this journey toward well-being?
So I think I like to think about it as editing rather than adding. So I think you need to take a realistic look at your life, what that entails, whether it's work, partners, kids, whatever it is, and thinking about where your opportunities are within that day and being realistic about it. I think people go awry when they start adding a whole bunch of things around it, time they don't necessarily have. So I would encourage everyone to start there and start thinking about where are areas where I can edit. For example, I take the stairs. Anything under 5 flights, I take the stairs. And it doesn't take a lot of time. We're talking like less than a minute. And maybe if we're out of shape, it takes a little bit longer, but everyone has that time. If you're in a high-rise building, you're probably waiting longer than that. So that's like an example of I have the time, I'm working it into like my commute. And, I think being honest and assessing where you are and being kind to yourself along the way. Our goal with the book is to provide you a number of tools and tips. And then, you need to identify like, these are the things that resonate with me, I can find joy in, and integrate them into my life. I think a lot of the conversation is about adding. And I think more of the conversation and our goal is to be about editing into your lifestyle.
Yeah. And if you're unsure where to start, I'd read The Joy About Well-Being and the 8 pillars, but treat them as opportunities for self-assessment. So, ask yourself, okay, how am I doing on sleep? And if you're a phenomenal sleeper, then that's probably not where you should be investing for the highest yield. You need to be thinking more about those areas of your life where you need a little bit of help, and focus on those places that are going to have the highest ROI first, because you can't focus on everything at the same time. As someone who literally is in this business of wellness, I've found that to be true. And then I think being able to connect to that question of what brings you joy. There's so many times in our life where we've been on a treadmill of work, achievement, perfection, priorities, whatever it may be, but making sure that you're in touch with whatever it is that brings you joy and connects you to that higher calling and purpose in life.
I love that. And on that note, that has been a personal goal of mine as well, is to do more things purely for the sake of joy, because I tend to find things that have secondary benefits, whether they're for health or fitness or anything else. And so I'm curious for you, what are some of the things that you have found that bring you the most joy that you incorporate?
Moving to Miami was partly for our children and partly for ourselves as humans. This is a city that, brings us more joy because of the connectivity to nature, because of the ability to be outside, and because of the ability to be more active. So playing pickleball brings us a lot of joy. I wish we were able to play more. Being at the beach with our daughters and, having our feet in the sand, building a sandcastle, going in the water, brings us a lot of joy. You talk about those secondary benefits, which I think our brains may be wired the same way, because I also love that it, takes our phones away from us. You can't literally be on the beach and be scrolling and, kind of wasting time on social media when you're there. And it forces you to really be present in that joyful moment.
And for me, walking on a beautiful sunny day is just heaven for me. If I don't get my 10,000 steps, I'm just in a bad mood. And I think walking is just one of the most underrated practices out there. There are cognitive, cardiovascular benefits. Do it with a friend. That's always a great way to marry connection with cardiovascular. You can do interval walking. You can do zone 2 walking. There are so many ways you can do it, but that's just like one of my all-time favorite things to do.
I love it. It's hard not to find the secondary benefits, right? And things that bring you joy. But I think that question is so important, right? Like, is this truly bringing me joy, or am I feeling like I have to do this because X, Y, and Z? So I love that. Well, I know we are just about out of time. We'll do a lightning round of the 3 questions that I ask everyone at the end of the podcast. So we'll see. I'd have to look back and see what your answers were before, Jason. I'm sure they've evolved. But the first one is, what are the 3 things that you do on a regular basis that have the biggest impact on your health?
I drink black coffee. It helps wake me up. They're fantastic.
Probably has a positive impact on everybody else's health around you too, I'm guessing.
Exactly. Rich in polyphenols. There's so many studies. So that's a big one. Walking is a big one. I got to get my steps in. And I do a hybrid of breath work and meditation every day. And that's kind of what the day brings. It used to be pre-kids, I would do my 20 minutes every day, twice a day. Then now it's more like I have a minute there, maybe to do the mindfulness, maybe to be some breath work, or maybe I can do 10 minutes. But those are the 3 I do every day, no matter what.
How about you, Colleen?
Sleep, nostril breathing. And then something that is a work in progress for me is getting my 30 grams of protein at every meal.
Love it. Oh, it requires a lot of attention. We're
going to slug some protein right after this.
That's great.
Need my
Well, today is the day of the book launch. So super exciting that people listening can go out and find it today. Where can people find the book and learn more about what you all are doing?
Sure. They can go to thejoyofwellbeing.com or to Amazon or your favorite book retailer.
Love it. And where can people find you aside from Mind Body Green?
At Jason Wachob and at Colleen Wachob, and all things mindbodygreen as well.
Love it. Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for being here today. I loved reconnecting with you. I love all the work you're doing, all the heavy lifting to sift through so much information to give people this practical guide and to give such great perspective on, it's truly about so much more than just perfecting all these health behaviors, but it's about the joy and the fulfillment that you have in life along the way.
Well, you are very kind. It's so great to see you, and we hope to see you in real life very soon.
Yes.
Thanks so much for tuning in. If you enjoy listening to the podcast, please consider subscribing and giving it a 5-star rating on iTunes. It really does help to get the word out to more people.